It was supposed to be a regular, peaceful Saturday at our lake cabin, coffee on the deck, birds chirping, my wife tending to the garden out front. Nothing out of the ordinary. That was until she showed up, Karen from the HOA. We'd had a few run-ins before, mostly over nonsense like lawn height or parking spots, but this time, she came marching up the path like she owned the place, demanding to see my wife's ID. No good morning, no explanation, just attitude. My wife, calm as ever, looked her dead in the eyes and simply said, "No." What happened next felt like a movie. 10 minutes later, we heard sirens. Not one, not two, multiple. Police SUVs rolled in, tires kicking up gravel, and to our shock, a SWAT truck pulled up behind them. Karen stood on the driveway, smirking like she'd just won the lottery. Officers poured out with rifles at the ready, yelling commands, demanding to know who was on the property. My wife never flinched. She slowly reached into her jacket and pulled out her military ID. It's the same one that's taken her through war zones and back. But before anyone could say a word, the entire tone shifted. The SWAT team froze. Then, to Karen's horror and our complete disbelief, asterisk, asterisk, they lowered their weapons and saluted, asterisk, asterisk. The silence that followed said it all. And just when you thought that was the end of it, it wasn't. Because what happened next made this HOA drama a story we'll never forget. The look on Karen's face said, everything, total confusion mixed with panic. She had no idea who she was dealing with. One of the SWAT officers stepped forward, addressing my wife by her full military rank and last name, with full respect. Turns out, not only was my wife a decorated combat veteran, she had once trained a few of the very officers. Now standing on our driveway, and Karen. She was still standing there with her arms crossed. As if that somehow gave her control over the situation. But let me rewind for a second. We bought this lake cabin a few years back, hoping for a quiet retreat away from the noise of everyday life. At first, everything was peaceful, until the HOA started creeping in with their random rules and nosy inspections. Karen, self-appointed neighborhood enforcer, seemed to make it her mission to question everything we did, where we parked, who we invited over, even when we chose to mow the lawn. But this latest stunt, calling the cops because my wife didn't show ID on our own property, crossed a serious line. The irony? We'd been extra cautious to follow the HOA guidelines, even when they were ridiculous. But that didn't stop Karen from pushing her limits. She didn't know the land's full history. She didn't know who my wife really was. And she definitely didn't expect the law to side with us. But just as she started backing away, trying to save face, something else happened that no one saw coming. Karen's voice shook slightly as she tried to explain herself to the SWAT officer, insisting she was just looking out for the neighborhood. But it was clear her confidence was starting to crumble. What she didn't realize was that she had unknowingly triggered a protocol. The moment she mentioned a suspicious person with a firearm in her 911 call. That language was taken seriously, especially when the person being reported had a military background. The officers had arrived, expecting a dangerous standoff. What they found instead was a calm woman sipping coffee by the lake, completely within her rights, standing on her own land. Meanwhile, the rest of the neighborhood had started peeking out from their porches and windows, watching the scene unfold like it was a movie. Some of them were used to Karen's antics, but no one had seen her misfire this badly before. What made things even more complicated was that this incident stirred up old tension with the HOA board. A few members had already grown tired of Karen's self-appointed authority, and now, with police involved, their hands were forced. But they didn't want a scandal either, especially one that could make the whole HOA look bad back at the cabin. My wife remained quiet, letting the officers handle it. But beneath her calm was a mix of anger and disappointment. She didn't mind being questioned, but being disrespected in her own space by someone who had no real authority. That was a whole different story. And Karen still wasn't done. Karen wasn't ready to back down, even after the SWAT team had lowered their weapons and offered my wife a respectful nod. She marched back to her golf cart, clearly fuming, and pulled out her phone again. Within minutes, 2 members of the HOA board showed up, trying to mask their discomfort behind forced smiles. They approached cautiously, asking if everything was okay, but it was clear they were trying to gauge just how bad the fallout might be. The problem was Karen had stirred up more than just a misunderstanding. She had started something that couldn't easily be brushed under the rug. Word had spread fast around the lake. Neighbors who once avoided conflict were now speaking up quietly, at first about Karen's behavior. My wife, still calm, chose not to escalate things, but she wasn't about to pretend nothing had happened. She made it clear to the board members that she wouldn't tolerate being harassed on her own property, especially not when the law, the deeds, and even the cops all confirmed she had every right to be there. The tension didn't just sit between Karen and us anymore. It was now between the HOA and itself, between those who wanted to keep peace quietly, and those who were tired of being pushed around. One board member hinted they might revisit leadership roles at the next meeting. That was the first real crack. But the biggest shock came later that night, when a mysterious envelope was slipped under our cabin door no-return address, but inside was a photo of my wife. In uniform, I picked up the envelope, puzzled by its appearance. No one had seen anyone approach, and the cameras on the property installed after earlier HOA complaints caught nothing. Inside, the photo was crisp, clearly printed, and showed my wife in full military gear, standing beside what looked like a classified operations unit. There were no words, no threats, just that one image. When I showed it to her, she froze. Her eyes narrowed, and she quickly slipped the photo into a drawer, saying quietly, "Someone knows more than they should." The mood around the cabin changed instantly. We weren't just dealing with HOA drama anymore, someone was digging deep. Maybe too deep. That night, we noticed a black SUV parked just outside the lake property boundary. It didn't belong to any of the neighbors. Windows were tinted, and it didn't move, even after midnight. Karen was nowhere to be seen the next morning, and oddly, neither were the 2 board members who came to apologize earlier. The story had clearly taken a turn. And whatever was coming, it wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. My wife's past, which she had kept quiet about since retiring, now seemed to be dragging more than just old memories to the surface. I started to wonder if this had been personal from the beginning, if Karen's obsession with rules was just a cover for something bigger. The silence from the HOA became deafening, and the SUV kept showing up always, just out of reach, always watching. Something was coming. 2 days later, just after dawn, the silence was shattered. A fleet of black vehicles rolled up the gravel path, headlights cutting through the fog. My first thought was that the HOA had gone too far, but this wasn't them. These were government plates. Agents stepped out in uniform, and behind them, stepping calmly with purpose, was a man in a dark coat holding a folder. My wife stood on the porch, arms crossed, unshaken. The lead agent approached her, snapped a sharp salute, and quietly said, "Ma'am, we apologize for the breach." This situation should have never reached the public. I stood, stunned. My wife gave a subtle nod and handed over the photo we'd received earlier. The agent's expression changed instantly. "That image was flagged," he muttered. "There's only one place it could have come from." Then, without further explanation, he turned back to the team. They swept the area professionally, quick, quiet, precise. The SUV that had been lurking vanished within minutes, towed away by a flatbed before most neighbors even woke up Karen. watching from behind her blinds, came outside shouting questions, but no one answered. She ran toward one of the agents, demanding to know what was happening. They simply said, "You need to back away. This doesn't concern the HOA anymore." Then, in a final twist none of us expected, the man in the dark coat handed my wife the folder. "You're cleared to resume," he said. My wife opened it, eyes scanning quickly, and smirked. "Looks like I'm reinstated." After the agents left, the neighborhood fell into an eerie calm. No more whispers from Karen's porch. No more HOA letters stuffed in our mailbox. It was like someone had flipped a switch. Silence replaced the usual drama. My wife, calm as ever, placed the folder in our safe and poured herself a cup of coffee like it was any other morning. I asked her what exactly reinstated meant, but she only smiled and said, "Let's just say some things are better left unspoken." Over the next few days, the strange SUV never returned. Karen kept her distance, and even the HOA president avoided eye contact whenever we crossed paths. The fire they tried to start over an ID had burned out fast, doused by something they never saw coming. Whatever history my wife had, it clearly ran deeper than any nosy neighbor or self-important HOA board. We went back to enjoying our lake house without interruption. No more surprise visits, no more patrols, just peace. That whole encounter left me thinking sometimes people are so busy trying to control others, they forget who they're dealing with. Respect goes both ways.